Mr. President, thank you so much for being with me.
Thanks for having me.
So Trump attended a groundbreaking here where we are for Foxconn. He promised 13,000 jobs, and only about 1,000 of those actually exist right now. So I know you're promising more than 2,000 union construction jobs and that 100,000 people are going to get trained in AI here. Why should people here believe that you will succeed at creating jobs where Trump failed?
He's never succeeded in creating jobs, and I've never failed. I've created over 15 million jobs since I've been president. 15 million in three and three-quarters years. And secondly, Microsoft is a serious player, and they're very much engaged in making sure that they pick this area as sort of the home base for their AI initiative in the nation. And they're gonna do it. And just like, and by the way, well, I shouldn't go into it, but Trump is, he started off with the golden shovels, you know.
For the groundbreaking
for
here.
the groundbreaking, and talked about this being, you know, the eighth wonder of the world. When has he ever done anything he said? I'm not being facetious. Think about it. He started off, he lost, other than Herbert Hoover, he's the only other president who lost more jobs than created in his four-year term. He's, the way he managed the end of his last year when we were dealing with COVID, 1 million people died. He told people to inject bleach, that may do it. Wasn't a real problem. When he did an interview with one of your colleagues where he just flat out acknowledged he knew how dangerous it was, but he didn't want to speak to it. You know, it's, I just, and look at what he says he's going to do if he gets elected. He says he's going to do away with what I've done on Medicare, reducing the price of Medicare drastically. He said he's going to do away with the Affordable Care Act. He said he's going to do it just down the line. So we have a very different view. I look at it from physician, not being facetious, from a Scranton perspective. He looks at it from Mar-a-Lago perspective. He wants to give more significant tax cuts to the super wealthy. You know, we got 1,000 billionaires in America. You know what their average federal tax is? 8.3%. He talks about if I want to raise it to 25%, that would raise $40 billion, $400 billion over 10 years. We could further reduce the deficit, which I've been able to reduce. I mean, it's just a completely different perspective on how we should proceed.
When it comes, though, to the 100,000 jobs specifically that we're talking about here, people training in AI, the actual jobs, when are they actually going to have jobs, those 100,000 people that are being trained?
Beginning probably the first tranche in 3 to 4 years. The community colleges are going to, the one we're at, we're going to provide for 2,000 folks and to be able to be trained, 200 a year. And it's going to go, the whole pipeline goes all the way through out to high schools and training facilities. You know, it used to be that when I was in high school, and even at the tail end, very tail end before you went to high school, most public high schools had shop and home, you know, learn to work with your hands. It doesn't exist anymore. And so it allows people who have skills and be able to train to technical skills to be able to make a decent living without a college degree. And it's what we need.
So when we talk about the bet on AI and sort of what it means, I don't know if you saw this weekend, Warren Buffett had his annual meeting and he talked about AI. So the first thing he said was, okay, it's got enormous potential for good. But then he likened it to the development of nuclear weapons in the US. And he said it scares the hell out of him. You know, he always says it like he sees it. And then he says, quote, he doesn't understand a damn thing about it. And that may capture how many Americans feel. Does AI scare you?
AI has enormous potential, enormous downside potential. That's why 3 years ago I got together the major architects of AI from the different operations around the world. I met with them in Europe and here in the United States. And it ranges all the way from one of the leaders saying it's going to take over human thinking, all the way to folks that say, no, it's not a problem. And so that's why I set out certain standards that it can't do no harm, and we have to make sure we know how to do that. We have to make sure it's controlled. And that's all, and it's the most significant, I think, technological development in human history.
The most significant in human history.
Yeah, and not in terms of war and peace, but in terms of being able to, one leader in the AI community said to me, it's going to overtake human thinking, and which is frightening.
Terrifying.
But the other, most think it can be used for everything from find cures for cancer to significantly increase productivity.
So when you talk about the economy, of course, it is by far the most important issue for voters. It's also true right now, Mr. President, that voters by a wide margin trust Trump more on the economy. They say that in polls. And part of the reason for that may be the numbers. And you're aware of many of these, of course. The cost of buying a home in the United States is double what it was when you look at your monthly costs from before the pandemic. Real income, when you account for inflation, is actually down since you took office. Economic growth last week, far short of expectations. Consumer confidence, maybe no surprise, is near a 2-year low. With less than 6 months to go to Election Day, are you worried that you're running out of time to turn that around?
We've already turned it around. Look, you look at the Michigan survey. For 65% of American people think they're in good shape economically. They think the nation's not in good shape, but they're personally in good shape. The polling data has been wrong all along. How many, you guys do a poll at CNN, how many folks you have to call to get one response? The idea that we're in a situation where things are so bad, the folks that, I mean, we've created more jobs. We're in a situation where people have access to good paying jobs. And the last I saw, the combination of the inflation, the cost of inflation, and all those things, that's really worrisome to people with good reason. That's why I'm working very hard to bring the cost of rentals down, to increase the number of homes that are available. But let me say it this way. When I started this administration, people were saying there's going to be a collapse of the economy. We have the strongest economy in the world. Let me say it again, in the world.
Although GDP last week was far short of expectations.
Oh, it wasn't. Look, GDP is still growing. Look at the response of the markets. Overwhelmingly positive. Overwhelmingly positive. And one of the reasons why people feel good about it not being as strong as it was before is they believe that the Fed's going to respond.
They hope they're going to get a rate cut.
Yeah. Well, so, but I mean, no president's had the run we've had in terms of creating jobs and bringing down inflation. It was 9% when I came to office. 9%. But look, people have a right to be concerned. Ordinary people, the idea that you bounce a check and you get a $30 fee for bouncing the check, I changed that. You can't charge more than $8 for that. Or your credit card, your late payment, $35. I mean, there's corporate greed going on out there, and it's got to be dealt with.
What about, I mean, but there's real pain. I mean, grocery prices are up 30%, more than 30%. Since the beginning of the pandemic, and people are spending more on food and groceries than they have at any time really in the past 30 years. I mean, that's a real day-to-day pain that people feel.
It really is, and it's real. But the fact is that if you take a look at what the people have, they have the money to spend. It angers them and angers me that you have to spend more. For example, the whole idea of this notion that Senator Casey talked about, shrinkflation. I think it's on your
Same
program.
price for a smaller bottle of juice or
Well,
something.
for example, Snickers bar, they did a thing, and it's like 20% less for the same price. That's corporate greed. That's corporate greed. And we've got to deal with it, and that's what I'm working on.
I want to ask you about something happening as we sit here and speak, and that, of course, is Israel is striking Rafah. I know that you have paused, Mr. President, shipments of 2,000-pound U.S. bombs to Israel due to concern that they could be used in any offensive on Rafah. Have those bombs, those powerful 2,000-pound bombs, been used to kill civilians in Gaza?
Civilians have been killed in Gaza as a consequence of those bombs and other ways in which they go after population centers. And I made it clear that if they go into Rafah, they haven't gone into Rafah yet. If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities, to deal with that problem. We're going to continue to make sure Israel is secure in terms of Iron Dome and their ability to respond to attacks like came out of the Middle East recently. But it's just wrong. We're not going to supply the weapons and the artillery shells used that have been used.
Artillery shells as well.
Yeah, artillery shells.
So, just to understand what they're doing right now in Rafah, is that not going into Rafah as you define it yet?
They haven't gone into the population centers. What they did is right on the border, and it's causing problems with right now in terms of with Egypt, which I've worked very hard to make sure we have a relationship and help. But I've made it clear to Bibi and the War Cabinet, they're not going to get our support if, in fact, they go in these population centers. We're not walking away from Israel's security. We're walking away from Israel's ability to wage war in those areas.
So it's not over your red line yet?
Not yet, but we've held up the weapons. We've held up the one shipment as an old shipment was designed. We've held that up.
And I want to ask you one more thing, if I may. The images that people see out of Gaza are horrific. The UN's talking about, some of these mass graves and the summary executions that there's been evidence of, torture. The images of children, it breaks anyone's heart to look at it. And obviously, we've seen that frustration here in the U.S. on college campuses. And Mr. President, I had signs at college campuses. Some say Genocide Joe. Any of us that have gone to those campuses, sometimes we hear that chant. Do you hear the message of those young Americans?
Absolutely, I hear the message. Look, two things. First of all, there's a legitimate right to free speech and protest. There's a legitimate right to do that, and they have a right to do that. There's not a legitimate right to use hate speech. There's not a legitimate right to threaten Jewish students. There's not a legitimate right to block people access to class. That's against the law. That's against the law. And so, and if you look at the data, these demonstrations are real, but they're not nearly, look, and I made a speech on the Holocaust the other day. Mm-hmm. And I pointed out that, it took 7 decades to get to the place where after the Holocaust occurred, and there's still anti-Semitism. Look what's happened. In 7 weeks, 70, what's happening? Everybody's sort of forgotten about what happened in Israel. Those 1,200 young kids murdered. I saw pictures, I went over there shortly after. A mother and a daughter being roped together and then kerosene poured and burned to death. Nothing's like that happened in the Jewish community since the Holocaust. So when I went over immediately after that happened, I said to Bibi, don't make the same mistake we made in America. We want to get bin Laden, and we'll help you get Sinwar. But we went into Afghanistan it made sense to go get bin Laden. It made no sense to try to unify Afghanistan. It made no sense, in my view, to engage in thinking that in Iraq they had a nuclear weapon. Don't make the same mistake. Focus on, and we'll help you focus on getting the bad guys. And we got to think through what is happening after Gaza, after this is over. Who's going to occupy Gaza? I've been working with the Arab states. I won't mention them because I don't want to get them in trouble. But 5 leaders in the Arab community who are prepared to help rebuild Gaza, prepared to help transition to a 2-state solution.
To govern it?
Well, to maintain the security and peace while they're working out a Palestinian authority that's real and not corrupt.
All right, well, Mr. President, thank you very much. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
So obviously we're here in Wisconsin. It was a crucial state for you, one of the ones that put you over the top. It was the same for Trump when he won in 2016, and he was actually here last week on his day off from the Stormy Daniels trial. He told the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Mr. President, quote, "If everything's honest, I'd gladly accept the results of the election." And then he continued, though, with this: "If it's not, you have to fight for the right of the country." How seriously do you take that threat?
Seriously, just like I did January 6th. The guy is not a Democrat with a small d. I mean, he is the idea. Look, you can't only love your country when you win. Number one, how many court cases do they have? Supreme Court cases. They all said this is totally legitimate election. This is Trump. I mean, it's saying whether he may not accept the outcome of the election. I promise you, he won't.
Promise that he won't.
He won't.
So,
And which is dangerous. Look, I travel around the world with other world leaders. You know what they all say? Not a joke. 80% of them, after we have a major meeting, they go, "We got to win. My democracy to stay. Their democracy to stay." Because when you think of the things he's saying, if I'm reelected, if he's reelected the president, he's going to make sure his attorney general prosecutes those he tells them to prosecute. And if he doesn't, he's going to fire him on the first. Not just the first. No. He said this about prosecution across the board. He's going to be, I am your retribution. What president's ever said anything like this stuff? But he means it. Going to wipe out the changes we made in Medicare, change we made in terms of drug prices, change we made. He's going to wipe it all out. And then he's going to put in a 10% tax, which is going to increase everybody's cost. The average American costs $1,500 a year. I mean, listen to what he's saying.
So when you look at your campaign at this moment, you know, it's tight. It's tight. And Barack Obama, your predecessor, of course, he has said that this is an all-hands-on-deck moment. That's how he described it. So he believes your rematch with Trump is going to be incredibly close. It certainly looks like it will be. What's his advice to you when you talk to him?
Keep doing what I'm doing, and to make sure that what his advice